Good evening, everyone. Let's do a little call and response. Good evening, everyone. Thank you, and welcome to our program tonight. My name is Janelle Schuler. I am the Arlington Library Manager for Arlington Public Library. I want to welcome you to our program this evening with Dr. Noliwe. Let's try this again. Noliwe Rooks, as she discusses a passionate mind in relentless pursuit, the vision of Mary Mcleod Bethune. I'm really excited to be able to welcome her tonight because we had to reschedule from February, so I thank you all for joining us. I know you were looking forward to it in February. I hope you're looking forward to it tonight. Before we get started, just a few housekeeping items. As a reminder, as I have just done, please silence your devices that make noise. That includes your cell phone, your Kindle, because I know you've got all of the Overdrive Livy books on your Kindle right now. Please silence those devices. This presentation is being live streamed tonight, but not recorded. If you haven't purchased a book, there will be time to have it signed and to do so after the program at One More Page Books tables, out the door on the right. We would like to thank the Friends of the Arlington Public Library who sponsor all programming here at the library. Finally, we will take questions from the audience afterward. There is a mic here, and it will be placed in the aisles. To be mindful of everyone's time and to ensure that we can hear from as many people as possible, please present your question in a clear and succinct manner. There will be a book signing at the end as well, which I mentioned. I want to thank you again for being here, and I want to now say a special thanks to Dr. Erica Sutherland for partnering with us tonight. Dr. Erica Sutherland? Yes, thank you. Dr. Sutherland joined the National Council of Negro Women in 2024 as Vice President of Public Affairs and Marketing. She is an equity-focused communications leader and educator with more than 20 years of experience across multimedia and diverse industries. Do I need to speak up? I know, is my mask muffling anything? Great. She has served organizations including the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights, the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation, the Obama Foundation, and the U.S. Department of Justice. A native son of St. Louis, Missouri, Erica earned a BA in Public Relations from Hampton University, the real HU? Yes. Okay, I hear you. Sorry, Howard. An MA in English from Old Dominion University, and a PhD in Media and Public Affairs from Louisiana State University. She is accredited in public relations. Erica is a wife and mother of 3 and a proud active member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. I'm going to hand it over now to Dr. Sutherland to introduce Dr. Rooks. Did you have the presentation? Oh, okay. No, we don't need that. Okay. If you could just leave the notes, though, that'd be awesome. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Again, I'm Dr. Erica Sutherland, and we are very excited to be here. I bring you greetings on behalf of the National Council of Negro Women and our president and CEO, the Reverend Siobhan Arline Bradley, who could not be with us this evening due to other obligations, but she sends her greetings and thanks as well. We are excited about this wonderful work, and I will introduce the author momentarily. Just a tiny bit about NCNW. We were founded 90 years ago in 1935 by Dr. Mary Mcleod Bethune. And we advocate for women of African descent, their families, and their communities. So we are still doing the work. The work is just as relevant as it was in 1935. The book, of course, will tell you much more about Dr. Bethune and all of her accomplishments and impact, but NCNW is certainly one of them, and we are continuing that legacy. We are based in Washington, D.C. We operate out of the only Black and woman-owned building on Pennsylvania Avenue. Thank you. So without further ado, I will introduce the speaker of the hour, and I will vacate to allow the important information to be conveyed this evening. Dr. Noliwe Rooks is the chair of Africana Studies at Brown University. Her award-winning scholarship explores how race and gender both impact and are impacted by popular culture, social history, and political life in the United States. The author of 6 books and numerous articles, essays, and op-eds, Rooks received an NAACP Image Award nomination for A Passionate Mind in Relentless Pursuit, The Vision of Mary Mcleod Bethune, and an award for nonfiction from the Hearst Wright Foundation for Cutting School, Privatization, Segregation, and the End of Public Education. She has received research funding from the Ford Foundation, the Mellon Foundation, and the Woodrow Wilson School, among others. She lectures frequently at colleges and universities around the country and is a regular contributor to popular outlets such as the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Chronicle of Higher Education, Time Magazine, and NPR. Her most recent book is Integrated: How American Schools Failed Black Children, and that was produced by Pantheon 2025. Please welcome Dr. Noliwe Rooks.
So thank y'all for coming out. Thank y'all for being here. It's always good to see folks come out in the heat, in the evening. I was telling someone I was sitting by, I'm the kind of person that you get in the evening, once I get comfortable, coming back out the house does not always happen. So I am grateful. I want to tell you some stories about Mrs. Bethune, more than anything else. And I think my hope is that out of the storytelling, you'll get a good arc and narrative about who she was and what she stood for. Where I want to start is in South Carolina, Maysville, South Carolina, where she was born. Mrs. Bethune would have been 150 years old next month. Her birthday is next month. And so right here in the crease between Juneteenth and Mrs. Bethune's birthday, I feel like the way that I shaped this is to think about what she stood on, what she stood for, who she stood for, and what the lessons of her life, what kind of sense we might make of today. I find myself regularly inspired by her. I want to start by, I'm sure you all know about the North Star. You know that it is a body that exists in the heaven. But in this particular context, I like to think about what was Mrs. Bethune's North Star. I mean, here is a woman, the 15th of 17 children, born to enslaved parents, the first in her family to be born free. There's 2 who come after her. But she's the first. She's 12 years old. I'm gonna tell you some stories about this, but she's 12 years old before she first goes to school and learns to read. The space between 12 and 27, when she meets FDR, when she meets Eleanor Roosevelt, and when she starts working for the federal government, she's the first Black person to lead a federal agency. At one point, she was the highest paid Black person in the federal government. She founded hospitals, she founded a school, she founded organizations, and she kept her eye on this North Star, which was freedom and acceptance and safety for Black women and girls. Now, she cared about a whole bunch of people. She cared about the US. She was not confined in her care and concern. She was an internationalist. She joined, linked arms at the last part of her life to think about a global movement for women. But in the beginning, she started out with this North Star. And the way that I want to think about North Star here is, think about, so you know, people who were enslaved, one of the ways that we talk about the North Star is the way that they found freedom was they heard, it was passed down to them. If you just look up the brightest star is going to be the North Star. And if you follow it, just have the faith, just trust enough to follow that light. You will get somewhere called freedom. For people who don't know where they are, who don't know maps, who are not literate, and literally only have this faith that what someone has told them, that light, just keep following it. And it'll get you where you want to go. But Bethune had, I think, a number of North Stars. And so I want to start with the people who shaped her, the people who I think poured into her in ways that made it possible for her to believe that she could do what she ended up doing. Sam and Patsy Mcleod were her parents. And there's 3 stories I want to tell you really fast that I think explain the kind of what she stood on. That's the easiest way to say it. What she stood on, what these people gave her that made it possible for her to dream. The first thing is when freedom came. This is why Juneteenth is important. When freedom came to Maysville, South Carolina, the general who called everyone to the town square and read the Emancipation Proclamation and said, from this day forward, you all are no longer slaves. Now go back to your plantations, to your owners, and figure out how you're going to live, what you're going to do now, what's supposed to happen, what's going to take place. Now, for many Black people, what that proclamation meant is that they could move. Like freedom for them just meant, I can get up and go, because movement was highly circumscribed, right, for them. So people are following off behind the Union Army. People are leaving rural areas like Maysville and going to cities, urban cities. Before there's a migration up north, Black people moved into urban areas first. What Mrs. Bethune's parents decided is that freedom wasn't going to mean very much to them without their children. The 15 children before Mary had been sold away. None were living with them on that plantation. Now, luckily for them, they knew where they were. They were in South Carolina and Georgia. They were close enough that you could kind of put out the word and stay in touch with them. So they talked about it, and they said, so we're free now. What are we supposed to do? They decided what they wanted to do was to go and talk to both of their former owners and make a proposition. They said, we will stay here. We won't leave. We'll call back all of our children and their grandchildren and their spouses and anybody else they want to have come. We will all work this land for you. This is the home that Mrs. Bethune was born in Maysville. We will work this land for you, but every year that we're here, you deed an acre to us. And at the end of 5 years, they had 5 acres, and that was the end of the agreement. The people weren't trying to give them all their land, but 5 acres, everyone said, this will work just fine. And they did call back their whole family. And so for them, being free meant they could be together on their own terms. And that's one of the first acts. That's the water that Bethune swam in. That's the air that she breathed. So when I talk about it as a North Star, how that shaped who she was, I don't know exactly, but I believe it had to shape her. The second thing that I want to talk about really fast is after emancipation, education became huge for Black people. The illiteracy was off the charts. As you can imagine, it was illegal to teach free in South Carolina, Virginia too. It was illegal to teach either free or enslaved Black people to read. Now, some states, free Black people, you could read. South Carolina and Virginia did not believe that that should be the case. And so she was 12 years old, but such a special kind of person that as the teachers, the volunteers were coming from north to south saying, we want to open schools to teach Black children, People all over the neighborhood or the area, because she was a rural area, they lived on farms, there was walking was involved here, said the one you want is Mary. You want Mary Mcleod. She's the one that needs an education. So teacher knocks on the door and, Patsy and Sam, and it's like, we'd like to give a scholarship to your daughter. We hear that she's deserving. She really should have this scholarship. We want her to have it. And they were like, well, what? But she's a worker. We're trying to survive here. We're talking sustenance. I mean, now 12 in our world, we're thinking, oh, a child and child. A 12-year-old in the South, in a rural area, not even just in the South, in a rural area, understands work, understands chores beyond taking out the trash, understands that what they are doing is keeping food on the table, literally. And so when the teacher showed up and said, we want her to go to school all day, 5 days a week, they didn't understand that. And they were like, well, what? I mean, who gonna do her work? How is that supposed to work? So they went away. People kept saying, no, you got to get married, you got to get married. So they came back another couple times. And finally, Patsy said to her mother, Mrs. Bethune's mother, said she prayed on it. And she was willing to go along with this idea of school. I mean, she wasn't opposed to the child learning how to read, but she was just like this organized school thing. We'll try it for a while. It was a 2-mile walk to the school, 2-mile walk back. Because she's going to walk. For country folks, not far. But, in today's terms, but that's a stroll for people from the country. So you're like, yes, she can go and she can come back. But every day she walks back in this house, she is going to have to teach her brothers, sisters, nieces, and nephews everything she learned that day. She's not going to be able to be too tired. She's not going to be able to forget. So the pact that I'm making with you is to help reinforce with her. This is her responsibility. And if this is what happens, okay, she can go. And reportedly, every day she walked back in that house, she shared her lessons with her family. But more than just with her family, she became the scribe. She became the person when people are getting letters from their family members who have left Maysville and have gone to Charleston, have gone to Atlanta, have gone elsewhere. And if they're able to get people to write letters back home explaining, I'm alive, this is what's happening, this is what I'm seeing, they couldn't read it. And again, illiteracy was such an issue, finding people beyond the preacher, a handful of teachers, it was difficult. She became the person who would go house to house and read letters. She became the person who would go to the general store and sit there and read the Black newspapers that were making their way into Maysville. And so she was able to present the world to others. Her education was not just about her, would be my point, in the same way that her parents' freedom was not just about them. The last thing is very fast, is that Mrs. Bethune was born with a cowl over her face. Now, for people, again, Southern or in certain traditions, you will hear, this across race, people who are from certain regions, if you're born with a cowl, it's just the placenta sac. So you're sort of born with something that looks like you don't really have features. It just looks like you're actually, because the placenta is over your face. For these traditions and communities, this is meant to denote. It's said that people born with a cowl have second sight. W.B. Du Bois talked about Black people and souls of Black folks as the seventh son of a seventh son born with a cowl and gifted with second sight. He talked about the ways, and others, Zora Neale Hurston also writes about people born with a cowl. It just allows you to see where you are and the other world at the same time. It gives you access to something else. And so Mrs. Bethune was born with a cowl over her face. Don't know if that explains it, but those are the three kind of points. I'm gonna move faster now. Those are the three North Star points that I think were constantly guiding her. So one of the things that's really fascinating, I think, about her is how often she's the only Black person in a room full of white women. This is in 1920s and 1930s. This is unusual. And she's the only woman, very often, in rooms full of powerful Black men. What are you saying? Oh. Well, no, you can hear me in here, right? Yeah, I'm just standing here. He's telling me I need the mic, so I was like, what have I done? I don't, wait, now he's moving me around. Okay, so she is here with Truman. I mean, you can see all the folks that she's there with. And one of the first things that I got caught up in when I started researching the book is this last bullet point about all of the organizations that she founded or headed or consulted for. She is directly responsible for the United Negro College Fund. The idea that Black colleges and universities should join together to become a body to advocate for others was hers. She was most of the civil rights organizations. She was the president of the Urban League in 1920. The NAACP, she was executive secretary for a long time, ASALH, the Association of African American Life and History, which was founded by Carter G. Woodson, her long-term friend. She was the longest serving president of ASALH, serving for 16 years. She founded the National Council of Negro Women, which we heard about, and I'll tell you a little bit more about. And she served as the president for the National Association of Colored Women. There were simply no spaces in the US and at the end of her life internationally that she didn't inhabit, transform, inspire. And always, she was trying to figure out how to make more space for Black people generally, but she led with Black women and Black girls, needing to, helping us to really figure out what that space is around citizenship and democracy and the US government and Black identity. She was a trailblazer par excellence. So this is a little cringe, but I always show it. The relationship, one of the relationships that was central for her. Her relationship with Eleanor Roosevelt or FDR did not make her who she was. She was a political figure in her own right at the point at which in 1927 she first meets Eleanor Roosevelt. At that point, she had served as the head of the Black Teacher Organization in Florida. She had served as the first president. She founded the National Association of Colored Women, the Florida chapter. She had done things already. She founded her own school at the point at which she meets Eleanor Roosevelt. So she was a force in her own right in Florida. She was born in South Carolina, moved to Florida in 1904. There's no finer daughter of Florida. People from South Carolina want to claim her, but you know, she didn't open a school in South Carolina. She went to Florida to open the school. I'm just saying. So. But the story about how she meets Eleanor Roosevelt. So she, as I said, had founded National Association of Colored Women, the local chapter at the time, the Jacksonville area. And so she had been invited as the president to a tea in Washington, D.C. in 1927. The tea was hosted by Eleanor Roosevelt's mother-in-law, and Eleanor, and it was women's clubs. Eleanor Roosevelt had a deep history with organizing around women's issues. She was a club woman. And she had heard so much about Bethune and how inspirational she was, and she said, yeah, come to the tea. I want you to meet people. We're going to be talking about things. We're planning. So she walks in to the tea, and Washington, D.C., I'm sure y'all know this, is as segregated and as up south as any place else. And so the white women in attendance, which were all the women other than Mrs. Bethune, were horrified at the idea that she would be sharing a table with them. They were literally like, where's she gonna sit? And Mrs. Roosevelt, said, well, she's gonna be sitting right next to me. I don't know where you're gonna be sitting. Like you make whatever choices you need to for yourself. She is gonna be sitting here and be given the Roosevelt name. FDR wasn't yet, he wasn't yet governor. He didn't even get elected governor until the next year, but they were still a powerful political family. Everybody sat. She stayed. The two of them became fast friends. Over the course of what I'll talk about just very briefly, what you're just seeing are just some, let's take a walk through some of the things Mrs. Bethune did. She was at the founding conference for the UN in 1945. This is a picture with her, with Walter White and W.B. Du Bois. In the middle, the three of them were the delegation from the US. For Black people who were trying to make connections between segregation, colonization, and racism. And the arts. They wanted to talk a lot about the arts. But for this picture here with Eleanor Roosevelt with the pilot from the Tuskegee Institute, she, and I actually didn't know this. I didn't actually know that Mrs. Bethune had anything to do with, very often you will hear how Eleanor Roosevelt was responsible for founding the Tuskegee Airmen. You don't always hear that because the two of them were working collaboratively, they came up with this idea of, well, let's go to Tuskegee. So Mrs. Bethune was with the National Youth Association. This is where the civilian pilots program is housed. FDR decided, it's before the war, but FDR decided we don't have enough civilian pilots. We need to start training programs, and so putting them in land-grant schools all over the Midwest, for the most part. And buying planes and having people come teach people how to fly. Mrs. Bethune, who was already then a member of the government, said, well, we need Black colleges, need some planes. Black people also need training. And in a different kind of move, she said, I want training programs at some HBCUs, but I also want nurse training programs so that Black women who will need the military being segregated as it was, and healthcare being segregated as it was, if any harm befalls these young men who are learning to fly, who's going to patch them up? Who's going to take care of them? Who's going to see to their psychological needs? We need mental and physical health to be a part of this program at these HBCUs. So at each of the 5 that she advocated for, they instituted nurse training programs as well. So Black women would be able to learn skills. The majority of Black women at the time either worked as domestics or in agriculture, farm workers, and paths to other kinds of employment were few and far between. So as she advocated for HBCUs to get planes to be part of the civilian pilots program, she brought Black women in the door with her. It became communal. I harp on this quite a bit because I feel like we're in a political season where for so many, when you walk through a door, that's about you having a platform. That's about you having followers. That's about you wielding a certain kind of authority and power. And the thing that is inspirational to me about Mrs. Bethune is no matter how high she got, she was always thinking about who else can I bring? Not just my friends, not just the people I talk to, not just my family, but what groups of people can I advantage at the same time? So this is why I spend so much time talking about this aspect of who she was. So Tuskegee, Hampton got a plane, yes. Hampton was also a part of this program. Tuskegee, of course, famously got the plane. Bethune, in letters to Eleanor, this whole time is talking about how, this is good getting planes and training black women. Our goal, though, is to desegregate the military, right? Like we see this, right, as the first step. If we can get this going, it gives us something to stand on, to get the military desegregated so that black people can get military benefits. So that when they are, they'll put them in a position to better themselves financially and otherwise. And so they're running up against all kinds of walls with this. FDR don't want to desegregate the military. Southern people in the South, in Congress, have zero interest in discussing this whole integrating of the military. They, are kind of beating their heads against this wall. What is going to happen? And so they decide, we're going to go and we're going to have Eleanor actually take a flight with one of the pilots in order to show that they are competent, you can trust them. The First Lady flew, how bad can it be? How bad can they be? And they kept this information from the Secret Service, who were completely horrified when they show up at Tuskegee and she jumps in the back of the two-seater plane. And then it becomes clear this is not just a photo op. Like, they mean to, to fly. And she just backed down the Secret Service people. Really, they were not happy at all. But it hadn't been cleared. They hadn't checked anything. Like, it wasn't just, white women don't fly around with black men. It was really kind of like what. And so they spent an hour flying over the skies, came back down, all was fine. And they they went to see FDR and were kind of like, so we really think that we should integrate the military, desegregate, let's do it. And he actually signed an executive order following their relentless harassment, desegregating the military, but it never became law because those Southern people in Congress just flipped out. And so it's 8 years later that Truman actually signs the order to desegregate. But they got close, and they were strategists. And their friendship was a friendship that was real. It was a quality of feeling between them, but it was as much a meeting of political equals and strategists at a particular moment where they could both do some good. Fascinating story. So this is just one of my favorite Bethune quotes. The picture is there so that you can read the quote. So, power must walk hand in hand with humility, and the intellect must have a soul. So, one of the things about Mrs. Bethune in education, if you know anything about her, or most people who know anything about her, what they will tell you is she was a fabulous educator. She was an impactful educator, that she was a teacher and educator par excellence, which she was. But the way her vision and view of education was tied up with these things about community. So, for example, they had a farm at the Bethune School for women and girls. And the farm was to feed the children who were there, the staff, the garden, the animals. But reportedly, it was rare for anyone in need in the community to show up and want something, need something, because they were hungry, because they were poor, and her not respond. But in her response, what she said is, but you're going to have to give us something back. Now, you decide what that is. Do you want to work a couple afternoons a week? Do you want to babysit some of the kids? You want to come help clean? Maybe you can cook? We can do this for you, but at your own time, we're going to need you to give it back to us. And in that way, the school that she founded for her and the girls, and to have education be what it was going to be, became a community resource. a resource that it mattered to them that the school was there, not just because their children were getting educated, because it was an institution that they embraced, that they felt good about. She also founded the first hospital in the state of Florida. She might be the first Black woman to found a hospital, but I'm not 100% sure that that's the case, but I do know. Is in Florida, and the story there is she was traveling, and a young woman, one of the students at the school, had appendicitis. And so they rushed her to the hospital, which was segregated in Daytona, and because this child's appendix was about to rupture, she was in such distress, they said, okay, fine, we will operate on her. We will take care of it. By the time Mrs. Bethune got back and came to check on the student, the young woman was out on the back porch recuperating. They would not allow her to have a room in the hospital. So all of her aftercare was taking place in the Florida sun on the back porch. And she decided then, we need a hospital here. And so she went to the medical schools, the HBCUs, the medical schools, where a lot of the doctors had a hard time getting residencies. And she said, so here, you come do 2 years with us, be all kinds of opportunity for you to learn. And then she founded a nurse training program to support the doctors. And so now that we have actual doctors coming through the hospital, we will have nurses as well. For the period of time, a couple decades that it kept its doors open, they actually treated anyone who walked through the door, poor white people, indigenous people, Black people, they were not segregated. And so it was one of the first sort of medical places where if you have a need and we can help, come in. It modeled, again, what community institutions should look like. Finally, they just ran out of money, and the whole, again, this idea of integrated spaces was just not widely embraced, that it lasts for 2 months. 2 decades. That it lasted for 2 decades is something, but these are some of the images of the young women who are in the training program. So she really did think about citizenship and education as going hand in hand. Some of the graduates of her school went on to become Harry and Harriet Moore, who were martyrs of the civil rights movement in Florida. She came through this school. My grandparents came through the school, or my grandmother rather, not my grandfather. And this is Faith Hall. The first building that she built on the campus was a building called Faith Hall. And the story about Faith Hall, this is not from this moment, but because she was doing these things, teaching literacy, she had night schools for adults in the area, as well as a lab school. For teachers who were learning the trade, they had children who they taught. As a result, but part of the reason that she had the night school was because Florida was one of these states that had literacy tests if you wanted to vote. So you had to show up, you had to pay a poll tax first, you'd pay $1 for the privilege of voting, only Black people, and then you had to read something. It could be the Bible, be the Constitution, it could be the newspaper, just whatever the poll worker who was there handed you. You had to read it. Again, illiteracy being what it was, this was a huge stumbling block to voting. It was a race neutral. It wasn't just Black people have to. Everybody just had to read, but the structural impediments to Black people reading meant that they didn't often. And so the Klan told her, we want you to stop that. So women get the vote in 1919. Mrs. Bethune is deeply involved, as I told you, in the club movement. The club movement, this was their number one issue for decades leading up to actually the passage of the 19th Amendment. And Black club women as well were deeply involved in this question of suffrage. And so she was riding around her bicycle, signing people up to vote, and generally raising money, having bake sales to raise money for poll taxes. Her school became a hub of voter education. And at some point, the Klan sort of said, well, that's not what we think schools should be doing. Like, we were kind of okay if you just want to teach children or whatever, but this seems like you're getting into areas that make us uncomfortable now. And so they told her, you know, we're going to need you to stop that. Like, just stop it. And she just acted like they didn't say anything and kept doing her thing. And so one night, they got in touch with the town fathers, the leaders in town, and asked them to, this Klan now, asked them to turn off all the lights in Daytona. And because they wanted to make a point. They wanted to march on Bethune's school. Now, there were a number of Black men in town who secreted themselves. Once this got out, people talk in front of folks who work for them and stuff, so it's supposed to be like this top secret movement with the Klan, but they're talking in front of their domestic workers and who of course go and tell Bethune. I mean, so she found out almost as soon as it was planned. She knew that it was coming, and she knew they were going to turn off the lights. And these men were like, "You need to just leave, and don't stay, what?" And she was like, "No, because I'll keep running, right? If I leave, what's going to stop me?" And they're kind of like, "Well, it's the Klan. Like, what are we thinking?" And so they turn out all the lights in Daytona, and 80 Klan members on horseback march through the streets of Daytona with torches and full regalia, the Klan hat, the robes, and it was supposed to be reportedly just completely silent on that evening, and all you could hear were the footsteps of the horse. They weren't talking, they were just coming in complete darkness. So Mrs. Bethune said on her campus, what she was going to do was fight this with light. So she had them first turn on every light on campus. And so when the Klan come through the gate, expecting, of course, to be terrifying, like they didn't actually know that you knew it. And the men who were there to protect her were kind of like, we are willing, right? This institution is important to us. We are willing to battle to keep you and yours safe, but we understand there'll be consequences. Our communities will suffer. Florida was a big state for pogroms, for just raising towns, like for wilding out and taking everything that Black people had. They were known, Roseville, and they were known to do that. And so people were like, are we sure this is what we want to do? And so as the Klan walks in the gate, she is the children, she is all of the workers. This is not this picture, but it puts me in the mind of it. She had all the teachers, all the workers, and all of the children in the school to stand out in front of Faith Hall, which is this building, and to sing, "God will take care of you." And so later, and the Klan walked in one gate, walked out the other. No damage was done. They came back 2 or 3 other times over the years. They never did any damage. But Mrs. Bethune took quite a bit of heat for having these babies outside, like to face this. Why didn't you hide them? Why didn't you make sure they were safe? How could you have them there? And she said, because they need to know what is required for them to survive here. Now, I don't know if it's the choice I would have made, quite frankly, but there's a commitment there that is no small thing. All right, let me finish. This is in NCNW. The thing about it, National Council of Negro Women, it's an organization of organizations. So you can't, I don't know how well you can see, but there's civic organizations, professional, religious, sororities, and auxiliaries. And she gathered them all, there's 27, at least initially, organizations. And what she said is, you guys can all do your own thing all the time, usually. But when the times require us to gather, to think collectively, to have Black women across a range of positions in the United States come together to think about what we need to do, we need an organization to house it. And so this is what this was, this National Council of Negro Women, which she founded. I'm going fast now. This is I just want you to see their platform. This is their 10-point program. This is what the National Council of Negro Women was first founded to do. It puts me in the mind of the Black Panther Party's 10-point program. It puts me on the mind of many planks in many political moments that are still in need of doing. But in the 1940s, this is what Mrs. Bethune and the National Council thought needed to be paid attention to. Social Security, access to health care, education. She had a citizenship program that if you're interested, you can ask me about in the Q&A and I will tell you about. But the thing about it that I always am amazed at is the requirement for starting a new chapter of NCNW was to teach democracy and citizenship to the initial members. So they had to think about, what is it we want fixed in our neighborhoods and our communities? Is it a stoplight? Is it something with schools, something with police? Whatever it is, come up with something in our communities that need fixing, and then study who are the people who are responsible for being responsive to you. If they're in the Congress, if they're in the city council, wherever they are. And then figure out a plan of action to get this thing that you have identified that you need for your community, using democracy, using those tools that you're just starting to believe include you in them. That idea, again, of teaching and helping and wanting her, who she was, to inspire and help others. Yeah, okay, she did comic books, but she did art. I'm rushing because we're almost out of time now. All of these different artists, like her, I will tell you, she was the first person, Langston Hughes, the poet, says that she was the first person to ever tell him that artists was a career he should want to be. He was at Lincoln University at HBCU, and thinking, I kind of want to be a poet. And of course everybody's like, you need money, you need food. What do poets get paid? What is supposed to happen there? We're not wealthy people, and no one was for it. No one even understood the vision. And he says, the first time he met Mrs. Bethune, she came to speak. Two of them talked. She said, if that's what you want to be the best one that you can be. What can I do to help you? And they stayed friends for till she passed. And then Zora Neale Hurston, she hired to begin the first Black theater program at Bethune-Cookman. At any HBCU, actually, it's the first theater department at an HBCU, and she hired Zora Neale Hurston to run it. I won't tell you about that. I will just stop here. This is a picture of me when I was about 3 or 4 at a beach called American Beach with my grandmother and some of our family members. And the story about American Beach, Mrs. Bethune founded a beach, Bethune Beach in Florida. But about 10 years before she did, she helped to make possible this beach in right outside of Jacksonville. It's on Amelia Island, Fernandina Beach. It's one of the Georgia Sea Islands. Anyway, American Beach was founded by a Black insurance company executive, A.L. Lewis, who, I don't know if y'all know Johnetta Cole, you should know this name. So he's the great-great-grandfather of Johnetta Cole. And he took the pension fund from the insurance company and gave mortgages. So he founded a whole community in Jacksonville, the first kind of residential community founded by Black people with Black money to let Black people become homeowners. And then he was like, Black people, we really need to be able to relax also. And so the tagline for this beach, American Beach, was relaxation without humiliation. In Florida, there is 2,200 miles of beachfront area. At the time, there was 5 miles that Black people could walk anywhere near. And it's a part of the story of Florida. One of the battles is around access to public space, but beaches. Mrs. Bethune ended up founding her beach when in Daytona. She took some of the young women from the school for a day on the beach and were run off. The police came, pearls were clutched, people were fainting, oh my God, Black people want to get in the water. And she hollered at them for a while and they went back and forth. And she finally said, I'm just found a beach. Like this is, like we need this too. For this beach, Mrs. Bethune was important because, as I said, this is the tail end of the Sea Islands. The Sea Islands end at the St. Johns River, which is about 3-4 miles from American Beach. And the Sea Islands are the place that Sherman, during the Civil War, said should be a Black homeland. When you hear about 40 acres and a mule, this was a field order that Sherman issued that was about making a Black homeland of these Sea Islands, which had been taken from the people who had taken up arms against the federal government to fight for their way of life. And so the government was like, okay, well, you forfeit that. You are traitors. You forfeit that. At some point, they gave it back. Not very long. They didn't keep it very long. They gave it back. This 5-mile stretch of Amelia Island somehow never got given back, so it remained in federal government hands, just this little 5-mile piece. And she lobbied Truman to give it to A.L. Lewis. And yes, and that is what happened. And so it was possible for me and my grandmother to know summers on the beach, and we owed it all to Bethune, and I had absolutely no idea until I did this project. So thank y'all. I know we maybe have time for 1 or 2 questions. I think we only have time for a couple questions.
Short and quick. Does anyone want? We can be in the middle, or I can bring this to you.
Behind you.
Oh, the library director.
Yeah.
Oh,
Great.
hey.
Thanks.
Hey, Director of the Library.
Great. Wonderful talk. Thank you so much. Can you talk a little bit, too, about her relationship with Dorothy Haight, who was such an icon for us local folks?
Yeah, Dorothy Haight. She was her protege. She handpicked, Mrs. Bethune handpicked Dorothy Haight as the person who was to take over for her from the NCNW, National Council of Negro Women. She became this firebrand who was also always all about NCNW. And Mrs. Bethune, she was her biggest fan. I mean, literally, cheerleader. But in her own right, she became a figure and a fixture on Capitol Hill. She had a gravitas. She was fearless. And when it was time to rally others to the cause, whatever the cause, if it was welfare reform, if it was, you would always see Dorothy Haight. For the last 10, 15 years of her life, she was in a wheelchair. It did not stop her one iota. You would see her in her wheelchair, wheeling around, holding people, making sure that they were accountable. She was also, she kept the vision of Mrs. Bethune alive, both as a person. There's a Lincoln Park in Washington, D.C., has a statue, and that is one of the last, I think, Bethune-inspired acts that the National Park Service takes care of still. I keep looking at this, going, are y'all gonna keep, I mean, I keep looking at it, but they still are. There's a statue, a Black person sculptor who sculpted it. Yeah, if I mean, you need if you want a fan, this is what you want, but a fan with purpose, and well-trained. And she was imbued with this spirit that I think about Bethune, who again, she was a trick bag, I'm sure. I'm sure she was selfish sometimes. I'm sure she was cranky sometimes. Like, I am sure all of those things were true. But she was also, again, always about moving forward and bringing as many people with her as possible. And Dorothy Height is very much came from that same kind of tradition, which is not, I don't know, all that in evidence these days. not in the same ways. Yes, ma'am.
Where's the button?
Here, use mine. No, who? There you go.
Could you say a little more about her being an internationalist towards the end of her life?
Yeah, she had always traveled a lot. She got to a point, she didn't, of course, growing up, but she got to a point where she was traveling pretty well, going on speaking tours. And at some point, she began to see the oppression of women globally as the same oppression. And in the same way that she thought we needed the National Council of Negro Women, an organization of organization, bring together women who are already active into a body, almost a lobbying body. She started to think like in the same way internationally. So she started to think, if we're seeing misogyny and patriarchy, these are not terms that she would use, but the oppression of women, as something that is global in different ways. Even if we don't all have the same history, even if we don't all have the same specific experiences, look at what's happening to women around the world. And so at this 1945 conference, she became very close with a Southeast Asian woman named Mrs. Pettit, who was an organizer in Europe around women's issues. And Mrs. Bethune started to say, well, you know, I think perhaps it's not just Black women that I need to only focus on. She never stepped away from NCNW. She never stepped away from Black women. But she began to say, but maybe all of our freedom is tied up together. Maybe there's a needle to be moved if women across region, geography, and identity come together to fight for employment, to fight for economic self-sufficiency, for fight to open up whatever society you find yourself in that is making it difficult for you to lead. At one point, she actually wanted to take Negro women out of her organization and just make it, it's just gonna be women. And the rank and file was like, yeah, no, you're going too far now. Like we're here for, like, you know, making international relationships. We are not here for just getting rid of the whole thing. So she backed off of it. But the last years of her life were all about looking beyond the US for connections. I feel, okay, we're gonna do one more because I feel like I don't want to keep y'all forever.
I just wanted to let everybody know, in case you don't already know, that Mary Mcleod Bethune is home in Washington, D.C., the Natural Historic Site. Visited along with the National Park Service.
Yeah.
It's on Vermont Avenue, just north of Thomas Circle, so if you haven't been, you should all go check it out.
You should, it's Council House. Yeah, it's great because it's set up. So much of how it was set up during the time is still there. I team taught a class on Mrs. Bethune with a professor at Howard. We used technology. So we taught at the same time using technology. And we went, I did bring the Brown students to DC. And we went to Council House. And the things for most of them really were seeing the different pamphlets and newsletters still sitting there, the different missives, the letters, and reading and kind of saying, but this sounds like, but this is very clear. I mean, they lost themselves in the ephemera, right? It wasn't as much the Ranger John, who is fabulous, as someone who will take you through the Council House and explain it all. But it was to have the opportunity to see and touch the clothes that she wore, to sit at the desk that she sat in, to see the typewriter. A typewriter was these children had not seen a typewriter. They really had not seen a typewriter. It was not the electric ones. It was, they had not. They were amazed by the typewriter. But yeah, you get almost enveloped in what it must have felt like, and what they were doing and what they were reading. And it really kind of transports you back, yes. And her home on the campus of Bethune-Cookman is also managed by the Park Service. These are all places and Carter G. Woodson's home, she got into the Park Service. She saved Frederick Douglass's home in DC that was falling apart. She started a campaign to keep that going. This idea of memorializing the buildings, not just the organizations, right, but what it meant, what she knew it meant to those people at that time to own buildings. And she knew what had happened. And that you got to this period after integration. I just wrote this other book about integration. I can turn to integration really easily. After integration, what starts to happen to some of these Black cultural landmarks, to this idea of Black community? It's supposed to expand, and it does, the opportunities for Black folks, but some markers of that before time and some people from those before times are sort of forgotten and moved away from, because that's old-timey. You know, now we're crafting a new kind of identity. But she, in the 1940s and early 1950s, understood that these markers, these places mattered and needed to be protected. And that at the time, she believed that putting them in the hands of the federal government would protect them for the future. And so she worked hard. Wallace Thurman, who's a figure, he lived in Daytona. He was at Morehouse for a long time, the theologian that was very influential in the interwar years. His house in Daytona, she also made sure was preserved. She convinced Branch Rickey to have summer camp with Jackie Robinson in Daytona. She worked that whole thing out, and so there's a whole story about the National Leagues and that level of integration that starts in Daytona because Bethune made it possible for Jackie Robinson to stay safe during summer training in ways that other southern states could not make possible. So commemoration is a big part. She has a statue in Statuary Hall right now, representing the state of Florida. It was between her and the inventor of the air conditioning and I almost, I am here for Bethune, but I could see the argument for the inventor of air conditioning representing. And voting right. That interwar period, this is what I will tell you, writing this book and the new one had me do a deep dive into Black politics and democracy and Black people and the federal government and before the formal, what I think of as the civil rights movement, right? Like what I think of, it starts with Emmett Till being murdered in 1955 and the Montgomery bus boycott, Till's murder. Like that is what I thought about. I know better, but it's what I thought about. And so many of the strategies that were honed and used, so much of the access. We often talk about King as if he did not have a close relationship with Johnson. He was maneuvering through the federal government on a regular basis. They planned stuff together. And that kind of model of being inside and outside, actually having credibility, not just being inside, not just like I'm rising up and now I'm gonna be in the government and that's just that, but actually having support from rank and file, grassroots, regular folks who believe that you have their best interest at heart, much like King. King was the first person that I thought about. Frederick Douglass a little bit, but King was the one that until I found out about Bethune. And I was really like, but why isn't it, I mean, like she before that period did so much to link voting, education, democracy. And while those things still remain as areas in need of attention, her strategies, her thinking, I think she's a political theorist with few equals, and strategist with few equals. And we don't talk about her like that. We talk about her as an educator, which she was. Like, again, my grandma, I have her graduation photo from Bethune-Cookman in my office right now. She was. But so much more.
I just want to let everybody know, if they don't, that Bethune is part of the second grade curriculum in Arlington, and I'm so
Yay!
She gets prime billing.
I did not know that. I think that's great. Yes, ma'am. Oh, integrated. So integrated, how American schools fail Black children, is part kind of a memoir. It starts with my grandparents, who were educators in Clearwater, Florida, segregated South. They were master teachers. And I knew them as master teachers. I learned how to read at a very young age. My grandmother was a reading teacher. She taught me. It wasn't magic. I talked a lot. What I tell people is I was a chatty child, and in order to have any peace, she taught me how to read so she could say, go sit over there and read the book. But I would constantly hear about pre-brown Black schools as chicken shacks and with no teachers who didn't know what they were doing. Everything was subpar. There was nothing about Black education before Brown somehow, as I was sort of learning the story, that actually wanted to talk about the success of so many of these schools. And so I was trying to figure out, but why, like how come people seem shocked when I say there were quality Black schools before Brown? Teacher organizations that people were shocked, like, no, Black people had nothing. They were in chicken shacks. No one could teach them. And so it started with me wanting to tell a family story. And I do tell their story, my father's. My father's story is he was the first in the family to integrate, to go to, he went to segregated Black schools in Clearwater, Florida, then went to Howard University, and then went to school out in San Francisco, where he met my mother, who went to San Francisco State. And it was the first time he'd ever had teachers who didn't think he was capable. They fundamentally did not believe that he was intelligent. And the fight, he'd never had that before. He'd had to work. He'd had to raise his game. He'd had to burn the midnight oil, but he'd never had to prove his humanity. And the space between my grandparents and my father was one I hadn't really seen talked about a lot, where he couldn't survive integration. His countenance, he was not put together in a way. So the story that he tells or that my mother told me, that the thing that started to break him really, is he's in law school, very proud of himself. You would sit in assigned seats and the professors would just like call on you and ask you whatever random question, just shout it out, you had to answer it. And he would answer the questions and do his best, and he would always be told he was lacking, always. There was always something wrong with what came out of his mouth. But she said, the teacher would call on others, they would repackage and rephrase what he had just said and be called brilliant. And he could never get to the brilliant. And he'd never not heard that. He's a valedictorian, graduated from Howard valedictorian at econ and a philosophy major. He'd never heard that he was not brilliant. And it was too much for him. And he started to drink, and that was a demon he could never overcome. And it's not integration's fault. But there's that story that I got started with about how is it you could have these master teachers, nobody know it, and then you have some people for whom integration wasn't necessarily in their best interest, and no one know that either. The story that we have is integration came, and then if there were problems with education on the behalf of Black people, it's their fault. It's their problems. It's their families. Nothing about what's happening to children who are in spaces where at least that first 10 years, arguably they weren't wanted. Nobody asked white people if they wanted these Black children in their school. The Supreme Court did a great thing. It was a civil rights win. But for people in Virginia, South Carolina, these people were like, nobody asked us. We don't want this. How are the rights of these people outstripping our desire for what we want in school? And so the story of integrated is the resistance to the way that integration was attempted. Not the idea of it, but the way that we did it, that led to just constant fights and pushing out, and what that meant. This is the last thing I'll say. Really, we'll see. I mean, I talk about my family in this book, so that matters almost as much as Bethune. There's an oral history that I read from a teacher in North Carolina who said the way that they integrated what we wanted to do as teachers at the time. We wanted Black administrators and teachers to go to white schools, and white administrators and teachers, the adults, to come to Black schools, and we take some time to work out, what all the things we understand, where you're going from a legally segregated society to one where you're sharing space and not used to. Let us work all that out and then bring the kids. Don't bring the kids first. The NAACP and the folks advising them were like, no one's going to harm kids. People will feel so badly if anyone is mean to these children that this will aid our ability to integrate. It'll only be a couple of kids, and then the milk of human kindness will flow forth, and schools will fling themselves open, and they were simply wrong. They were simply wrong. And so the story of how they got that wrong and what the difference it makes is what that book is about. All done? Yeah?